are standing by to see if the Senate passes what is a bipartisan bill that would issue a new set of sanctions on Russia. This was a key goal of the late Senator Lindsey Graham. With us now is Sir Bill Browder, the head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. He's also one of Vladimir Putin's most prominent international critics. It's great to see you again. This series of sanctions, among other things, would provide pretty steep penalties on so-called secondary oil markets, countries that take in Russian oil. How significant do you think this would be if it passes?
It would be very significant. So if you look at the whole situation with Russia, the big question is, how does Putin afford this war after all the sanctions we've already placed on him? And the answer is very simple. He affords this war because there's one huge loophole, and that is he's able to sell his crude oil all over the world, get hundreds of billions of dollars from the sale of that crude oil, and then fund his military, fund his war. And so the idea of these sanctions is to say, okay, let's go to the people who buy this oil and say, we're going to penalize you big time if you buy the oil. You can buy oil from anyone else, just don't buy it from the Russians. And that's what this bill is all about. It closes the last remaining loophole and really puts his economy in a bind if it gets passed. Now, having said that, there's one huge loophole within the sanctions bill that everyone should be aware of, which is it doesn't force the U.S. to sanction these secondary buyers of the oil. It gives the President Trump, the ability to do that. And we don't know whether he will or he won't. And so if this bill gets passed, if Trump implements it, then Putin's in deep trouble. I don't think there's any question about the bill getting passed, but there is some question about whether Trump will implement it.
Yeah, it's sort of a can, not a shall or a must in the language of the bill. It's interesting because Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky is coming to the United States this week and will no doubt meet with the president, I would presume, at some point. Just the difference between the dynamics of this week and what was it, March 2025, when the president told Zelensky he had no cards. Well, how many cards does Zelensky have as we sit here today?
Well, Zelensky has developed a lot of cards since that infamous meeting. The main card that he has developed is the ability to strike economic targets inside of Russia. Every day now, Ukraine is hitting oil refineries, fuel depots, army installations, shadow tanker ships in various bodies of water, and he's causing Putin an immense amount of economic pain. Now, we should not underestimate Putin's ability to retaliate, and Putin is going to probably draft up to 500,000 new soldiers. Apparently, the North Koreans are going to send in 30,000 more North Korean soldiers. He's saving up ballistic missiles to hit Ukrainian heating plants so people freeze in the winter. He's got a lot of nasty stuff up his sleeve. But we're in a situation right now where the war is not 50. I mean, it's not 90-10, it's 50-50, with the Ukrainians 50% hitting Russia and vice versa.
You said the Ukrainians are hitting Russian assets or interests in various bodies of water. It's interesting because the Iranians now are accusing Ukraine of hitting a vessel in the Caspian Sea. We have the Caspian Sea up. The Caspian Sea is the route where Russia and Ukraine have been engaging in all kinds of trade, military trade, over the last several years. And the Iranians are accusing Ukraine of hitting one of their vessels that was being used to get information or weapons back and forth there. Is this sort of a confluence of all these wars at once and in one place at this point?
Well, and since the very beginning of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, they've been using drones from Iran. Iran has been the main drone supplier until Russia started making their own. And so Iran is a fair target. They've been involved in this war, and whatever they're moving back and forth between Russia and Iran is absolutely a fair military target. I mean, it really is a confluence of a lot of things. You have the North Koreans involved. You have helping Russia. You have the Iranians involved in helping Russia. It's kind of using George W. Bush's language. This is the axis of evil all working together, hitting a democratic country that shouldn't have been invaded in the first place.
Another phrase from George W. Bush was, you can judge the nature of a man by the company he keeps. I mean, you can judge the nature of Russia by the company he keeps. If the company is Iran and North Korea, that does tell you something. Sir William Browder, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Joining me now, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. He's also Distinguished Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Ambassador Taylor, always good to talk to you. Earlier today, the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, said that the aid that the U.S. had provided to Ukraine had depleted a lot of the U.S. munitions stockpile. What do you hear in that statement, him specifically talking about the impact of Ukraine?
Well, the real impact on the stockpiles has been the war in Iran. The incredible number of Patriot missiles and Tomahawk missiles fired in Iran, that's what's really drawn down the stocks. That's where the problem was.
When we talk about the Patriot missiles, as I just mentioned, they had asked the U.S. to authorize the license, right? The licensed production of Patriot missiles. We had at the NATO summit earlier this month, of course, you have President Trump saying, and I'm quoting him here, "A little birdie told me we'll give them the right to make Patriots." So it was a little bit vague when the president said that. Took a few people by surprise, especially because the reporting was he hadn't really discussed that yet with the companies who manufacture the Patriots. But what does that tell you about where things could move for Ukraine?
Well, they're moving in the right direction, Erica. That's very clear. The Ukrainians are on the front foot. The Russians are on the back foot. The support from the United States has not been coming in terms of weapons, but this license to manufacture Patriots is a good signal. It's not going to solve the problem right away, but it's a very good signal of support for Ukraine from the United States. Ukraine's getting great support from the Europeans, and if the Americans will support that, that will help as well.
When we talk about support, there was certainly, I would say, surprise, to put it mildly, among a lot of people when Laura Loomer, of course, went to Ukraine, had this sit down. The impact that has had back in the United States, also leading to some speculation about whether this is a bit of a shift when it comes to Ukraine's messaging strategy, if you will. Recognizing that perhaps in the United States, for support, and specifically the support of this administration and the president, that Ukraine may need to look to alternate sources to help get that message out. Do you see this as an effective messaging move for the Ukrainians moving forward?
So, Erica, I don't think this is a messaging change. I think what we're seeing is a change on the battlefield, and that's allowing the Ukrainians to demonstrate that they are actually winning on the battlefield. They're taking the war to the Russians, deep into Russia. Putin is on his back foot, as I say. He's got problems on the battlefield. He's got problems economically. He's got a big political problem coming up if he institutes a draft, which he's threatening to do after his elections in September. So, no, I don't think it's a messaging change. I think it's a substantive change that the Ukrainians are actually winning at this point.
And that is an important message to bring to President Trump, right?
And President Zelensky will have that top of mind. President Zelensky is not asking for things right now. He is demonstrating that the Ukrainians have things to offer. We have the Ukrainians are offering to the United States drones and drone technology. So the Ukrainians are demonstrating that they are actually a net provider of security.
President Zelensky did say this weekend Ukraine has solid reports that Putin is preparing now an expanded mobilization in the fall, saying that this actually includes Russia receiving some 30,000 military personnel, several ballistic missile launchers from North Korea. This comes on the heels of some really devastating casualty reports a few weeks ago, highlighting significant Russian losses. What does this tell you? I mean, you talk about, how well Ukraine is doing in this moment, but when you see this warning from President Zelensky about what Putin may be planning, how would you assess the military position of Russia in this moment?
Clearly, the military position for Russia in this moment is dire. They are having great difficulties. One of those reports, Erica, that you mentioned analyzed that the ratio of Russian soldiers killed to Ukrainian soldiers killed is 8-1. 8-1 Russians killed versus 1 Ukrainian. And the numbers are coming out in various things. So, yes, you mentioned this possible mobilization, this draft. This could be Putin's undoing, political undoing. He's got big problems. He's not sure where to go.
You, obviously, former ambassador to Ukraine, but you've also been to Ukraine a number of times since the war began, I think most recently just 2 months ago. Can you just tell us what you heard when you were there? How are Ukrainians feeling? We're now, 4.5 years into this war? I mean, how are they handling things in this moment?
Erica, it's grim. It is grim. The Ukrainians are tired. They want this war to end. They're encouraged by the shift in fortunes that their military is inflicting. Their military is on the front foot, as I say. It has the initiative, and the Ukrainians are upbeat about that. But they are getting pummeled by these long-range weapons that the Russians fire in, and that the Ukrainians have very limited ability to shoot down. So they want this war to end. They are not going to give in to the Russians. They know what it's like to live under the Russians. They don't want to do that. They're determined not to, but they want this war to end.
Yeah. Ambassador William Taylor, always good to talk to you. Thank you.